All right, so are you ready for this? We're going deep on a question that I think has puzzled like all of humanity for centuries. What's the purpose of life? You know, it's a big one.
Yeah.
Today, we are diving into this question from an Islamic perspective.
Okay.
And all of this is from a document called Pasted Text. So we're going to unpack like its core arguments and uncover some pretty thought-provoking ideas about, like where we fit in all of this, in the universe,
Yeah.
all this stuff.
I think one of the most intriguing things about the text is the way that it starts out just tackling the concept of purpose really head on.
Okay.
You know, it starts out by highlighting the contrast that we see between everyday actions.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we eat,
Right.
we know that we need to eat to nourish ourselves. We know there's a clear purpose for why we sleep.
Right.
We need to rest. But then when it comes to the purpose of life itself, we get all of these, different
A million different answers.
different opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's so true. It's like we instinctively just get why we do the things we do on a daily basis. But then when you zoom out to that big question of like, but why? Why are we here?
Right.
It's like, what?
Why are we here? What are we doing here?
Yeah.
And the text uses an analogy. Imagine you have a bag
Okay.
and it's full of marbles,
Mm-hmm.
and each marble has a number on it.
Okay.
What are the odds that you would pull those marbles out in perfect numerical sequence,
Oh my gosh.
purely by chance?
Infinitesimally small. Like, I don't even know how you would calculate that.
Like basically impossible.
Yeah.
And so it uses that analogy to really challenge the idea that this universe,
Oh, wow.
with all of its complexity,
Right.
the order that we see in the universe, the fine-tuning,
Yeah.
could that have just emerged by chance? It's like saying those marbles,
Yeah.
they just arranged themselves
Right. Like they magically put themselves in order.
perfectly in order.
Yeah.
And there was no guiding hand in that.
Yeah, no, it's like saying that this universe is just a giant cosmic marble bag that just shook itself up and everything's perfect.
Right.
It's like, no.
So it's really arguing that there has to be something
Yeah,
more to
there's
it.
something more.
And then the text goes on, and it references verses from the Quran,
Okay,
3.189191.
okay.
And these verses evoke a sense of awe
Mm-hmm.
and wonder
Yeah,
at the scale of creation.
yeah.
And they prompt us to consider, is there a divine purpose behind all of this?
It is amazing when you just like look up at a night sky, you
Yeah.
know, and see all those stars, and it's like,
It makes you feel.
oh, we're just a tiny little part of something much bigger.
Yeah,
And I think all humans have that feeling,
right.
no matter what.
And then the text moves on to talk about the marvels of the human body.
Okay.
And encouraging us to just contemplate the complexity and the precision of our own biological systems. Think about the brain.
Yeah.
Think about the heart.
Right.
All of these organs
Working together.
working in perfect harmony.
Yeah.
Could we just attribute that
To just random
to
chance.
mere chance?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the text says, that's really illogical.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because I was just reading about how, like, the human brain has billions of neurons.
Wow.
And each one of those can have, like, thousands of connections to other neurons.
It's just a massive network.
It's just this massive web.
And to think that just happened by chance is kind of crazy.
When you look at the circulatory system, the nervous system,
Insane.
all of these systems in our body working together.
Like how?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it seems like the text is, building a case against this idea that like we're all just a big accident,
Yeah.
and pointing towards like there's a purpose baked into all of this
Right.
design.
And that's where the text introduces this concept of what it means to be Muslim.
Okay, now this is really interesting to me because I know Muslim is a word that we associate with a specific religion.
But it sounds like the text is using it in a much broader way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in this context, the text is saying that being Muslim goes beyond just being a member of a particular religion,
Okay.
but it's about surrender and submission to the will of God,
Okay.
recognizing that there's a divine order to the universe.
So it's more about aligning yourself with like a universal principle
Mhm.
than saying, I am this or I am that.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that the text extends this definition to encompass the natural world as well.
Okay.
So even celestial bodies, like planets and stars, they obey the laws of physics.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that sense, they're considered Muslim as well.
Wait, so like planets and stars are Muslim? I've never thought about it that way. So even like inanimate objects are fulfilling some kind of purpose
Mhm.
in this divine order.
That's what the text is saying.
Whoa.
It's challenging us to really broaden our understanding of purpose.
Yeah.
Even looking at the tiniest atom all the way up to the largest galaxy, how does that fit into the grand scheme of things?
So if like even inanimate objects have a purpose, what does that mean for us? Like
Right.
as humans, what are we?
That's our role in all of this.
What's our role? Exactly.
Yeah. And that's what the text really gets into in the next section, which is about worship.
Okay, I'm excited to hear about that. So we were talking about this whole idea of the universe having this divine order to it. Even the stars are a part of it. What does that actually mean for us humans, though? Where does this whole concept of worship come in?
That's a great question. And like the core of what the text is getting at, it's a big part of the Islamic belief that the purpose of life is to worship God.
Hmm.
But what's important to remember is that worship doesn't just mean like rituals and prayers.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Sometimes when I hear the word worship, it feels a little formal or restrictive, you know?
Absolutely. What this text is saying is that worship in Islam means that your whole life is aligned with the will of God. It's about always being aware of your connection to the divine and letting that awareness guide everything you do.
So that means like even just everyday things like the choices I make, the way I talk to people, that's all a part of worship.
Exactly. The text compares it to a servant trying to please their master. We're the servants and God is the master. And like a really good servant wants to do what their master wants in all parts of their work, right? Well, Muslims try to live their whole life with that same kind of devotion and obedience.
It's a powerful way to think about it. It actually reminds me of a line from the text that really stuck with me. It says, "If we are so quick to thank people for simple gifts in life, shouldn't we be even more thankful for the gift of life itself?"
That is a powerful line. It shows just how important gratitude is in Islamic worship. When we understand that our very existence is a gift from God, we should naturally be humble and thankful, and that thankfulness should be in every part of our lives.
So if the purpose of life is worshiping God, where do all the prophets fit into all of this? The text was talking about how prophets in different religions have all shared a pretty similar message.
That's a key part of what the text is saying.
Uh-huh.
It says that all the prophets, even figures like Jesus, they all had the same basic message at the core of their teachings. Worship God and live a good and righteous life. It's a really interesting idea that all these different faiths could have such a common message.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how connected all religions actually are. So if the message is the same, what's so special about the Prophet Muhammad?
That's where we see the difference between Islam as a universal idea and the specific things that the Prophet Muhammad revealed. So the text explains that even though the concept of Islam, of surrendering to God, has always existed, Muhammad is considered the final prophet who brought the full and complete message to everyone on earth.
So is it like the other prophets had parts of the message and Muhammad brought the whole thing?
That's exactly it. And that's where the Quran, the holy book of Islam, is really important. The text goes on to say that the Quran is unique because it's been preserved so carefully, unlike other religious texts that have lots of different versions and interpretations.
I remember that. It says that the Quran hasn't been changed at all since it was revealed to Muhammad. It even said that 1 out of every 5 people in the world is Muslim. That's huge. Shows how important this book is.
It is. The text really wants us to see the Quran as a divine revelation, as a source of guidance and wisdom that has been protected for centuries. It even challenges the reader, well, the listener in our case, to actually read the Quran and see what they think.
Yeah, it's almost like the text is saying, don't take our word for it, go read it yourself.
Exactly. It wants us to engage with the text and decide for ourselves if it makes sense. And one of the most fascinating things about the Quran, at least according to the text, is that it contains scientific knowledge that seems to predate modern science.
Now, this is the part that really gets me. The text talks about how the Quran describes things like embryonic development and the separation of ocean waters in ways that match what modern science says. But these descriptions were in the Quran centuries before scientists figured it out.
That's exactly the point. It's arguing that Muhammad couldn't have known these things when the Quran was revealed because the science didn't exist back then. It must have come from a divine source. It's like the Quran is looking into the future.
I know, it's just mind-blowing. How else could these accurate descriptions be in a book from the 7th century?
It's a big question. The text really wants you to think about how to reconcile the amazing scientific insights in the Quran with when it was actually revealed.
So we've talked about worship, prophets, the Quran. As we start to wrap up this deep dive, what's the takeaway message from all of this? It feels like we've only just scratched the surface, with all of this.
Yeah.
I'm curious, though, as we kind of get to the end of this deep dive, What does the text leave us with? Does it just like sum everything up, or is there more to it than that?
It kind of leaves the reader with one final, challenge.
Oh,
The whole point is that just reading about Islam isn't enough.
got it.
It really pushes for an active investigation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, go beyond just passively reading and think about it.
So don't just like take it all at face value. Like actually go and explore these ideas for yourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It even suggests that people go and talk to Muslims
Mm-hmm.
and, learn from people's experiences who actually live this faith. It presents it as a journey of discovery,
Yeah.
not about throwing out everything you believe,
Right, yeah.
but refining it, realigning yourself with a universal truth.
Yeah, it's like it's not about erasing everything you knew before, but it's adding to it.
Exactly. And to really hammer that point home, it ends with this really powerful question.
Okay.
The question is, if you really believed that this life was just the beginning
Mm-hmm.
and that there was an eternal afterlife,
Right.
how would that change how you act? How would that change your priorities?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That really does make you think about the big picture, doesn't it? If this isn't all there is,
Right.
how different would we be? How different would our choices be?
It really challenges us to examine our beliefs on a personal level and to think about how they shape our lives.
So as we finish up our deep dive into pasted text, it's clear that there's so much more to learn about this topic, but hopefully it's given our listener a starting point to understanding the Islamic view of the purpose of life.
Yeah. And maybe spark some curiosity. Maybe people will want to read the Quran or talk to Muslims or just think about that question at the end.
Right. It's a lot to unpack, but it's definitely worth exploring.
Absolutely.
And who knows, this could be just the beginning of our deep dives into Islam. Until then, stay curious and keep asking those big questions.